Thank you all for being online. I think most of you, probably all of you, know about the Enraged Arctic Research Policy Committee, and we're the Marine Ecosystem Community of Practice. So we cover all aspects from physics, biology, chemistry, social issues, as atmosphere part as it relates to sea ice and key drivers for the ecosystem. So the purpose of today's call was to be able to update you all on the Arctic Science Summit Week. Just very briefly, we have through the Pacific Arctic Group, we have 2 meetings a year, and I'll explain what PAG is, but basically it's a consortium of scientists, managers with interest in the Pacific Arctic ecosystem and coordinating cruises and addressing some key programmatic issues and science questions. So one of the things, so during Arctic Science Summit Week, many of you know that we have all different types of business meetings. So Anna Nikolopoulos is going to be speaking after Craig, is from Norwegian Polar Institute, and she's a physical oceanographer, and she'll be talking about the Pan-Arctic Distributed Biological Observatory. But we're going to start off with Craig Lee, who is a physical oceanographer from the Applied Physics Lab at the University of Washington. And he's going to give us an update of the developing the Arctic Regional Alliance. So with no more ado, I'm going to invite Craig to show his presentation, and we'll go forward. And then he'll have some questions afterwards. He's actually at a meeting, you all, in Sweden, and Anna's at a meeting in Finland, and I'm just sitting in my office. I'm not at sea. Okay, Craig, you're up.
Great. Thanks, Jackie. And thanks for having me here to give you this update this evening or this afternoon or morning for you guys. So what I'll talk about today is basically a status report on an ongoing effort to establish an Arctic Regional Alliance for the marine sciences. So this is in the framework of a Goose Regional Alliance, but it may not end up actually being a formal Goose Regional Alliance, but it's something that will function ideally in the same way. As I said, this is an ongoing effort, and it's the work of a rather large number of people. I'm here representing us, but in reality, it's Jari Hopla is the co-chair of this effort. Joseph Nolan has been providing exceptional support for the effort over an extended period of time, and has really done a lot of the heavy lifting to make these things happen. And then a long list of people, but Molly Karcher, Molly McCammon, David Allen, Ana Marie Garcia, who have all been really instrumental in a lot of things you're going to hear about today. So what is this? The idea has been around for a while to establish a Pan-Arctic Regional Alliance for Arctic observing, for Arctic marine observing, if you will. And that effort begins with the establishment of a task team to propose a regional alliance, develop a plan for what that alliance might be governed, et cetera. So this task team stood up a little over a year ago, something like 18 months ago, probably, although discussions have been ongoing for a while prior to that. And really the goal was to lead the process to co-develop this proposal for the regional alliance, right? So the proposal that would define the alliance's objectives, how does it want to function, what does it want to try to do, how would it be structured, and how would it be governed. But developing that proposal is a process, right? And the process needs to have wide representation. And in particular, it needs broad engagement from rights holders and stakeholders across the Arctic. Indigenous groups, local communities, coastal communities are really key to making this happen. When their concerns, stand by just a second. Hopefully this, I'm gonna go see if I can find a quieter place. I'm standing underneath the start of the dinner here.
That's okay. Real-time events.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Can you guys hear me? Okay.
Yes.
So I'll just keep going. So this engagement of Indigenous and local communities is really key to making this alliance happen, right? To coming to a functional group that would serve the needs of those communities. And then the last real function is to prepare for the implementation of that alliance. Essentially start to pave the way to actually make the alliance happen. So as a start for this, we worked on a set of terms of reference, functionally trying to define what it is that we would really be doing as a task team. And that begins with the design of an inclusive process, right? A process for making decisions about what's going to happen, a process for planning that includes representation and co-planning, right, with Indigenous groups and with coastal communities. So to instigate a process that has those people on board at the very start. In addition to this, there is this idea that we have a number of well-established GRAs around the globe, regional alliances in places like the coastal US, but perhaps more importantly in places like Pacific Islands, other areas where there is extensive involvement of coastal communities and of indigenous communities. And we can look to these groups for guidance about how to go about doing this. And one way that you might do that is to host briefing and information sessions where we bring in representatives from those other GRAs and essentially tap their knowledge, tap their advice for how we should move forward. This effort needs support. EuroGoose is graciously giving us about half of Joseph's time to support the development of the GRA, but one of the activities for the group is going to be seek funding to support one of the team's activities, in particular to support Indigenous engagement. For most of the people that we work with, this isn't their day job, right? They have other jobs to do. And so unlike a lot of the researchers, they actually need active financial support to be able to engage, to travel, and to participate in meetings. And then there's the usual inventory of existing activity and reporting out to Goose and to the SAON-SCs. Initial activity period is about 18 months, going until next autumn on 25 with the possibility of extension. So the trajectory has been that in 2023, we went before the Goose Steering Committee and laid down this proposal for a task team to develop the GRA idea. And they came back with some important feedback for us, some important and generally constructive feedback, what they wanted to see before they endorsed the task team. And the two areas of shortfall that they saw were Indigenous engagement and broader national disciplinary representation within the task team. And these were things that we knew we were short on, but the steering committee probably wisely wanted us to shore up before we actually began the activity in earnest. I'm happy to report at this point, although both of these things were challenging, we've made good progress on both of them. We have representatives from Alaska coastal communities sitting in the task team now, and we're pursuing leads for representatives from Greenland, from Canadian First Nations, and from the Summit, in the European sector. So there's progress in that direction, and additionally, there's been progress on bringing broader Canadian representation and representation from Asia. Recruitment in these areas continues, and we see that as a primary objective or a primary effort going forward for the coming year. We have the wind at our backs right now, which is fantastic. The establishment of an Arctic Regional Alliance for Marine Observing was identified as a priority by the G7 Future of Seas and Oceans Initiative. And they've lent their political support to this and have actually made recommendations for specific support actions from the G7 nations. So that gives us a bit of cover for what we want to do. The planning group is also recently endorsed by both SAON and Goose as an official task team within both of those organizations. The SAON endorsement is particularly important because it gives us an alternative path forward if, as is likely to happen, the path to a direct Arctic Regional Alliance is not available to us when the time comes. Geopolitical politics of the current age suggested it might be difficult to get that endorsement. In that case, SAON would serve as the group's umbrella organization, and it would still be able to sit at the GRA table and behave as a GRA within the community. And then the next big activity that I really want to report on was the community discussion session at the Arctic Observing Summit, recently, 2024. So at AOS 2024, we held a working session with 3 goals. One was to provide an overview of what a regional alliance is, history, what framing is, what it might do, right, what the concepts are. Why would you want to do this to begin with? Followed by 2 panels. One panel was meant to provide an overview of different Arctic GRA activities and different Arctic observing activities that might feed into this GRA, Pan-Arctic GRA effort. And the other, perhaps the most important panel of the evening, was to take a look at the rights, scenes, and contributions of Arctic communities, Indigenous communities. In particular, to seat a panel of Indigenous community members and have a discussion about what the needs are, what the concerns are, how one might approach moving forward. And we were lucky enough to get 3 panelists from those communities and to have them really lead a very open and wide discussion of their concerns, challenges, and needs. It's impossible to overstate how valuable that was to the group to hear this and how informative it was. The panel or the workshop was really well attended, mostly by researchers, but agency people and as I said, the representatives from the Indigenous communities, which were really key to making progress. So I'll go through this quickly. Panel 1, again, was an overview of Goose and some GRAs and other observing activities. It was good because it provided the context for what we're trying to do, an idea of what Goose was. Well, it supports the idea that Goose has started with this climate focus, but it has moved, evolved, if you will, over the recent few years to begin to think about connecting to the coastal oceans, the global, and to begin to think about reaching in to address societal needs in a significant fashion, which is something that is relatively new, and that they're feeling the way towards doing. It was good to see the diversity of GRAs, in particular because there are elements of existing GRAs that serve the Arctic, to start to understand how a Pan-Arctic GRA might function as glue to bind those individual elements together. You know, bits of Euro-Goose, parts of USIUs, parts of Canadian GRA all have Arctic elements in them. And how is it that a Pan-Arctic GRA would serve a different purpose as a point of contact or a focal point for bringing these large global networks into the Arctic as a communication point for the other regional associations to register their Arctic activities. Panel 2, thinking about the rights, scenes, and contributions of Arctic communities. Again, really a very, very fruitful panel for the group. The real outcomes for this were first of all, was really, and this is something we understood before and that Molly has been emphasizing, is that there's a real need to improve our ability to communicate the why to coastal communities and to Indigenous communities, right? Why would you bother to engage with this? What might be the benefits to your community and to your group? And what role would you play, right? How would you plug in? Part of that is actually, again, emphasizing the need to identify resources for these planning activities and for budgeting things. A really strong message that came from the group was that relationship building is key to everything, and that in order to build those relationships, the scientific community needs to slow down. Right? These things, it requires time to build these relationships, so you build mutual understanding and trust. And from that understanding and trust comes the ability to work together to plan these things. So there's a real investment needed to build these connections. And the timescales are sometimes different than the ones that we want to run on with scientific grants and the kinds of activities that we're used to doing. We heard about how shifts in food availability have been fairly severe and have had impacts throughout the entire social fabric of these communities. Not just the food itself, but culturally important activities and traditions that are being threatened. And the real message there was, if you're going to build a regional alliance to think about these things, it probably requires a skill base that extends beyond strictly the marine sciences. Right? There's social sciences and other aspects to this that need to be considered if you're truly looking at an observing activity or an alliance that would serve the communities. Again, the need for resources to support community-led and community-driven activities, in particular, resources that the community would get to decide how to use or to support their activities. That was something that the groups emphasized. And then the last piece of this was the idea that although the science community has really been emphasizing the need for really open data policies, right? Very rapid public sharing of data has become a standard within our communities, right? That we share your data, and it's more effective that way. That there are concerns within the communities that would say that they would like to see the data more carefully handled. They want to have a little more control. Data sovereignty, right? The idea that it's your data, they want to have some control of where it goes and how it's used. So there'll have to be a discussion about what data policies govern data coming out of the observing systems, and that will depend on what the data are and what the local sensitivities are. There are some proposed actions, workshops on community or local indigenous observing that are actually led by the indigenous observers and organized, rather than led by the science community, and that they would decide how to draw the science community in, and then perhaps a way to develop standards of excellence for indigenous observing. So I'll conclude by talking about where we're going. The task team met last week, I think it was. Time is flying quickly, but laid out a plan for moving forward in the coming weeks and months. So first and foremost is continued effort to broaden engagement, especially indigenous engagement and communities' national representation, where we're currently still a little bit short and people are underrepresented. So that's clearly a need, and there'll be ongoing effort put towards that. The task team is large right now, larger than is really functional. So we see a need for establishing a steering group taken from the task team membership, which will work to coordinate the activities of the task team and provide guidance. The task team membership would remain wide open to anybody who wants to participate, and ultimately decision-making would still rest with the entire task team as opposed to with just the smaller executive body. But the steering group is needed to try to help coordinate and move things forward. Initially, I think it's very important at this point that we produce a roadmap for how we're going to move forward, a guide for what we're going to do in the next 18 months to get to a proposal for an Arctic Regional Alliance. So that's high on the list of priorities, and we'll be working on that in the coming month or two. The big question facing us right now is it time to begin the process? We've been intentionally moving very slowly to allow time to bring on board the people, the voices that need to be heard, right, to make sure they're at the table, and to start to develop some trust and understanding within the group. But we're at a point right now where with the SEAN and the Goose endorsements of the task team, with the G7 support, that we probably need to begin producing something, right? We need to begin the discussions and begin the work of producing the proposal. So the question is it time? Can we begin those discussions with the people we have at the table while continuing to work to broaden engagement? And that will be a question for the team at large and perhaps beyond the team. We're moving to monthly meetings, and those meetings will include presentations by different regional alliances and different Arctic observing entities, probably one at each meeting, so that we start to accumulate those lessons learned. That was seen as perhaps a better way to move forward than trying to convene a workshop or a meeting where we concentrated all that in one big go. Lastly, we're looking to develop objectives for an in-person task team meeting and another workshop for the ASSW 2025 in Boulder, and looking for other possible opportunities. And with that, I'll leave it there for questions. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Craig, very much. Does anybody have any questions for Craig at this point? So do you envision, is it going to be, there will be a workshop then in Boulder? That's the plan? Will it be a half day, kind of like what we had in Scotland, or more intense?
I think so. We're thinking, maybe slightly differently themed than in Scotland, or maybe just developing those same themes.
Okay.
Again, by the time that happens, we should be along the roadmap some ways in terms of developing the proposal. So there might be something to really shoot at for a group, and it might be a good chance to garner feedback for whatever it is that we have at that time.
Okay. And will this be presented at the SEAN board meeting, so on a regular basis, like how updates are with moving forward on this vision?
Yes, but both
Okay.
SEAN and Goose wanted status reports at their board meetings.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Are there any questions in the chat box? I don't see them, Tony, or online. Otherwise, we're going to release Craig to go have his dinner. Okay.
Great. Well, thank you,
All
everybody.
right. Thank you so much.
Yep.
Yeah, and you'll be on the recording. If you have any interest, you can hear the rest later. Put you to sleep.
Great.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Thanks all. Bye.
So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen because I've talked to Anna, and I'm going to do the second talk here. And it's going to be on the an update. Let's see. Let me get this right. Here we are. Okay. So this is on an overview for the Pacific Arctic Spring meeting, and I'm going to look at the time so I don't go over here. We do have the Pacific Arctic group. You can see the web page there where the meetings and the PowerPoints will be presented. We had the meeting at the really nice old building here in Edinburgh, Scotland on the 24th of March. And it was at something called the Pollock Estate. And this is a presentation as a co-chair with Christina Gaethel, who is a early career scientists. So most of you probably already know the PAG is a group of institutes and individuals. Those of us from managers to scientists to coastal community who are interested in the ecosystem of the Pacific Arctic and serve as a partnership to plan and coordinate. So we have 2 meetings a year. The spring meeting, which is what we had at ASSW, and we'll have again in Boulder at the meeting that Craig was mentioning. It focuses on the business issues and an update on planning for the coming year. And that's the brief presentation I will give you. And then the fall is when we have it all moves around in the countries. And there's 6 core countries, really only 5 that are interacting right now in the current Ukraine situation. So it's China, Japan, Korea, US, and Canada, China, Japan, Korea, and the US. And so at that meeting that we'll have in the fall, we look at accomplishments from the field program and then where we go in the future. I'm not going to read the whole agenda, but that kind of gives you briefly. We have anywhere from a half a day to a day. We had a day meeting there in Scotland. We'll have a day and a half in the fall meeting that we have in Baltimore, I'll tell you about. But we have country reports. And then we talk about 3 core endorsed programs that we have within PAG, which are the Distributed Biological Observatory. You'll see the acronym DBO. The Pacific Arctic Climate Ecosystem Observatory, that's up in the Chukchi borderland area, that's PASIO. And then the Central Arctic Ocean, especially in relation to the retraction of sea ice and potentials of fisheries going north. We get updates then when I'm not going to present all of this to you today in the amount of time we have, but on the Synoptic Arctic Survey and this thing called Arctic Fox or any other early career. That one particularly is a forum that's just being supported by IAS, the International Arctic Science Committee, for early career fellows. They have postdoctoral fellows for people to participate in the different working groups of IASC. And if you're interested, you can get a hold of me or others that are in IASC. And so this group of past fellows are putting together what they call Arctic Fox to have this interchange. There are other groups that are putting together early career that are kind of parallel to APEX, which you might have heard about, the Association of Polar Early Career Scientists. We talk about synthesis and modeling, data issues, physical samples, how we interact with other organizations, and then also updates on our structure. So I'm just going to briefly go through. This is from China, one slide. This is what their plans are for 2024. So they're going to have 2 vessels that are moving into the Arctic, the Zhulong 2, which is their brand new research vessel, and another vessel called the GD. And you can see the dates on here when the Zhulong is out. It'll be out for 80 days, leaves from Shanghai, it's going up to the Chukchi, coming out of Shanghai, coming up through the Northern Bering, Chukchi. They have the DBO3 here. They'll go up to the Chukchi borderland. So that is a crossover with the Pacific Arctic, the PASIO, what we call, Ecosystem Observatory there. Then they're going to be going out on the Gackle Ridge. And then the other one has a question mark that Jia Feng, he's the representative from the Polar Research of China, talked about this other vessel that would be going up and doing more geology. Let's see, go forward.
Just one note, we can see your presentation. It's not in presentation mode, but we can see the PowerPoint. There we go. That? That's perfect.
That may explain why it wasn't advancing. So you saw China already. Then in Japan, their plans are Matoyo Ito will be the chief scientist. So when they come over from Japan, then they run on up this line. They do the DBO3 and they also the DBO5 here, parts of the DBO6, and they have their program to work out along the slope of the Chukchi Sea into the Canada Basin, then up across the borderland and a bit towards on the northern slope of the Chukchi Sea. The tentative titles, tentative cruise plan, key activities that they're doing anywhere from physics to sediment coring, mooring, plankton, zooplankton work. And I would just point out one of the activities we do on PAG is to put together a cruise table. So we have dates and points of contacts. We pass this through to the IARPIC group that builds a big where the ships are going when, just for everybody to know. But we have our own table that we do every 6 months when we have our meetings. And then at the Korea, and this is going out on, so the ship is going out on the Mirai for Japan. For Korea, it's going out, this is the second leg of the Korean Arctic Ocean expedition here, and this is using the Iran. And when it comes up, it does occupies DBO3 as a standard, then the straight up the international dateline, real intense sampling on the Chukchi borderlands and over to the slope and the outer part of the East Siberian Sea. So they have moorings that they deploy. They have acoustic moorings also. And you can see the period of time is July and August. And you can see the listing here. They have ice camps, CTDs. They have a mooring system. They look at for anywhere from physical ocean, chemical oceanography, and biological measurements for the different trophic levels. On the just one example of the one that the Sikuliak 2024, this is a combination of 4 programs in the US. And so when I give the country report, we have everything from Rebecca Woodsgate Bering Strait moorings to Craig's Amos moorings up in the high Arctic. And I'll show you a little bit about that, even though he's offline. But there's many other cruises, and I'm just giving you kind of a taste of this. But this is the purpose of the DBO, many of you know, is to look at status, biodiversity, and change in our time series sites from the northern Bering Sea into the and DBO 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. So this is a combination program between the DBO, the EcoFoci, which is a NOAA-led program, and the acronyms are spelled out down below, but that one is on ecosystems and fisheries observing. AMBON, which is the Arctic Marine Biodiversity Network, Chukchi Ecosystem Observatory. So we have multiple programs on one ship doing lots of multidisciplinary measurements, as well as many moorings are turned around. So it's a good use of an asset by a variety of programs. This is Craig's program, the Arctic Mobile Observing System, and this is a composite for the 6 years. He presented on this in Scotland. And then they're going out into the deep basin, moored arrays there. They're looking, they have acoustic measuring devices on that. And you can see that some of the description. There's also gliders and floats that are deployed, various programs. And you can see they're working underneath the ice. And this will also go out on the Sikuliak right after the cruise that we're doing in August. He'll be out there in September and October. Just one example, and I have pages of this. This is an example from Korea of publications that have come out of their research program. So we also have the special issue and the PLOS one for the DBO observing. There's a new special issue being brought forward for JGR Oceans and the Synoptic Arctic Survey. So multiple parts of the PAG is that we bring together, we outline what kind of syntheses are going on, if there are any people that want to be involved, and then we report out on those about every 6 months. Another point that we have is that in Shiga Nishino, he's going to be taking over the chair for the International Synoptic Arctic Survey. If many of you know, we had these cruises from 2020 to 2022, where multiple countries put ships into the high Arctic. And what Shiga is showing this conceptual when he takes over as the chair is how these different programs would be relevant to the ICARP process, which is the Conference on Arctic Research Planning that will be briefed out in 2025 at the Boulder, Colorado meeting. All of this is feeding in, will be process and iterative as we move towards the IPY in the 2030 period. But you can basically see the priorities he's involved in here, observing, predicting climate dynamics and ecosystem response. So he's highlighted the DBO coming in and out with research project, the Synoptic Arctic Survey with the multiple countries, the Japan consortium of their core research they have for long-term planning and research, and then the Central Arctic Ocean Fisheries Agreement, how feeds back and forth for this ICARP process. So now I'm moving away from ships into some of the cross-platform discussions that we have. Another one is Karen Fry gave a presentation on Arctic Colors, which is a NASA program that's is going to be launched. It's looking at the Arctic coastal land-ocean interactions, and they're looking at quantifying the coupling between biogeochemical, biological, and ecological response in the nearshore region. And you can see all the eddy formations here, land runoff impacts up, and looking at that under the relationship of changing ice condition. And this is a leadership under NASA. What Craig talked about on the lower part was the Goose Regional Alliance, but we also have one of the things we talked about are presented during Arctic Science Summit Week, which includes both the business meetings as well as moving into the Arctic Observing Summit. Is that followed right after the business meetings, and that is there are working groups embedded in that. One is to look at local to regional global observing, and then how to implement some of these time series observing, moving it from science to applied to societal issues. So one of the things that was presented was an expert panel on salmon. Whoops. The other one is Craig has already talked about this regional alliance, looking for that development. We did have that breakout session. He already gave a really nice description on that, but this is the movement towards the glacial ocean observing system. This previous one that I was mentioning, the Arctic Observing Summit, was part of the research network that ICAN has, research network activities for sustaining observations, interfacing with science observations with coastal community needs, and their co-production of observations in that region. And so these were topics that were brought forward and will be continued during through the year, but also highlighted again during ASSW 2025 in Boulder. And I'll just end by saying we are having our fall PAG meeting, and this is where we discuss the results from our summer program, a little bit of planning of what may be happening in the following year, and then but a lot more science brought forward, as well as hitting some of the planning meetings that would be going on, some of the science meetings. We have the AGU coming up in December. We have the Arctic Circle meeting coming up in Reykjavik, and the Alaska Marine Science Symposium in January. So a lot of these information, passage of that information is brought forward. But I just wanted to end on this because I will hold, these are open meetings, the 29th to the 31st in Baltimore. It's going to be at the Institute of Marine Environmental Technology, which is part of our University of Maryland Center of Environmental Science. Pick this area, it's in Baltimore. It's got a connection through the BWI airport and light rail right to the area where this meeting is, and further information will be brought forward. And I would just close by saying that the new chair will change over from the US to Korea, and Dr. Yujin Yang will be taking over that chairmanship. And her, if you notice, or maybe you did or didn't, but when Craig gave his presentation, she's now also on the board for developing the Arctic Goose. So it makes that connectivity with the Pacific Arctic Group. So with that, I'll be happy to take any questions you might have, and I'll stop sharing. So if anybody has any questions, I'll look in the chat, or we can move on. You see anything, Tony? I don't see anything.
Not seeing anything in the chat.
Okay.
Just a
Well,
reminder.
anyway, yeah, that's fine. I mean, this is an information base. I would think that, the report will be posted. We'll put that announcement out. It'll be on the website that we have here, and also on the PAG website. It'll have linkages to the PowerPoints that were presented. So if you have further interest, when that gets loaded on there, then we can direct you to that via the IRPIC webpage. Okay. So with that, and if it turns out after Anna gives her presentation and there's any questions, I'm on the line. So the third presentation will be with Anna, and she is going to present on the establishing a network of Pan-Arctic DBOs. And Anna, I'll let you share.
Yes, I'm trying to.
There you go.
There you go. And
you just need to put it in
a little too small screen for many stuff. Much things. I'm trying to, yeah, here it should come, right?
There you go. You got it.
Yeah,
Looks
and
good.
just a little something. Yeah, all right.
Okay.
So hi, I'm Anna Nikolopoulos calling in from Finland, just to confuse you. But as said, I'm at MPI in Tromsø, working on mainly on establishing the Atlantic part of the DBO network. I'm also a co-chair of the Arctic RUS, so also involved in this larger regional, or yeah, the Arctic Regional Alliance, and happy to see that it's moving forward. And with me for this, you can hear me well, right? I'm a bit wary about this microphone.
No, we hear you
but
clearly, Anna. We
yeah,
hear you
okay.
clearly.
I shouldn't shout. Yeah, all right. So, but of course, with me, it's all about networks, right? So with me are, first of all, the leads of each respective regional DBO, and of course, many collaborators there bring it onward. The current, the current constellation of the Pan-Arctic DBO, which is the topic for today, is the one in the map. And you recognize the pioneering Pacific DBO here across us, across the Arctic Ocean from us. But lately we have developed some more kids in the family, or siblings, or whatever we call them, and trying then to cover the very complex environment that Arctic Ocean hosts. And here in the map to the right, you see the main current patterns. I'm a physical oceanographer, so I love that. But of course, it's not only dictated by the currents, but also by the, as you know, the differences in topography, bathymetry, and a lot of other things, ice coverage. And so what we are trying to get better at is to join forces to track the changes in the ecosystem and also the associated environmental changes. Or as we talked about before, we see it as the full ecosystem functioning, right, from the top to bottom. And we're trying to increase the coverage, the data coverage within some dedicated sites, which are typically the ones plotted in these maps. Of course, there are more stations to it as well, but for the sake of focus, we try to distill some specific sites for that, and to facilitate then long-term efforts, and also opportunistic sampling of passing by cruises. And all these areas have long-term efforts as a backbone to their development. But we're trying also to attract new efforts as well. And one big thing is also to try to be overarching between these different scales in projects as well, or efforts that even soak in more temporary projects to maybe national long-term efforts. Most of you know the drill of this. But yeah, so lately, and now when we are the 4 members currently in the network, the Arctic Summit Week occasions have turned into the Pan-Arctic DBO community meeting events. So we had our second meeting this past March, where we had a nice strong attendance. I think we did well. It was a very inspiring day. We are talking about both just describing the last state or the latest status of the DBO, but also the scientific sort of landscape and the findings there and updates as a first part. And then also we try to squeeze in some discussions of more perhaps organizational type, because we need those two to move forward as a network. And there I want to reach out with special thanks to the invited speakers that were helping us forward and guiding us onward with within data management, Øystein Godøy from Norway, Matt Enno and Tom Kelly from UAF, Fairbanks. And then also on scientific outreach from Amy Lauren in Fairbanks. And also, maybe that's good to know, maybe for younger scientists, at least this time, we were fortunate to get travel funding granted by the IASC Marine Working Group for participation of 4 early career scientists. We hope to keep that trend onward, but then it was possible to grant some of the travel costs, at least for the listed ones, and spread it across the globe also, so that we had some representatives from each DBO. So that was a whole day meeting, and I won't go into the science talks, but just show the output from the meeting also, which built on this discussion part, as said, with Øystein and Tom and Amy having some good thinking. Some of the thoughts are caught here in the picture that we were reminded. I'm all covered with all these small pop-up windows here, but yeah, reminding us again that it takes time, it takes patience on the data side to move onward and make it as harmonized as possible, so that data also can talk together. I like that expression, and not only as people, but we need to sort of make them fairly harmonized to talk across borders or across oceans. And also he reminded us about we need to also put some efforts in training, and that is a good way of, you know, being the following this harmonization flow. So start training early, and the more training, the more patient we get, I guess. And we try in this Panarctic network to also be a good model for others when it comes to putting data into action. And also Tom Kelly, he also helped us with thinking like we should, in this time perspective, but try to put up goals for sort of today, what can be accomplished already, perhaps on existing data, and what can be done tomorrow and then beyond. So try to differentiate a bit and partition it a little bit to move onwards within different time scales. And also on the outreach side, Amy helped us with or reminding us that a good thing to do for putting down a vision is also to think that it's or to see it as it's a flowing conversation between years or between projects and within the network, and what do we wish to say with that, and also what impact are we aiming at doing, and moreover to try to find good tools to track the impact, so that we know when we are on track or not. But yes, so these build down then to the aims that we will work on until next summit week. And I think we are in the what we call it, in the phase now that we sort of need some more formal type of a steering group then, and also maybe associated working groups, although we shouldn't reinvent the wheel or make it too complicated, but we should at least talk about how we would like to move onward now as as we have more members in the network. So that we are working with currently also to figure out the next steps there. And we need to talk and plan our joint progress within the data management context, where we want to reach, and how we want to increase the connectivity between moving from the regional data sets and aspects to the Pan-Arctic ones. And also, again, as I said, the scientific outreach build on the Amy's suggestions and try to make a roadmap ahead also. And all that except or beyond working on the usual stuff and trying also to solidify some products or tangible outputs, one-pagers, landing pages, web pages, and so forth to be visible. And I mean, in my mind, and hopefully yours, the rest of the crew as well, we are of course moving on through our meetings, like the regional fall meetings and then the spring meetings, and see what works best and take one thing at a time and make decisions together with the rest of the community. All right, so Jackie wanted me to also update about one or two efforts actually also connected to the Pan-Arctic DBO. And the first one after the summit week was a participation in a side event, at least, by primarily Arild Sundfjord, which is also the lead for the Atlantic Arctic DBO, in this Ocean Decade conference in Barcelona. And together with some more Arctic actors on this, they were invited to make a side event. It was hard to make sessions in that conference, and it was really a strict time. I think they got a lunch time slot here on 11th of April. But they focused their discussions and some talks on the need for international priorities and coordination, and of course also the very essential involvement of indigenous and local communities and their knowledge. So they had discussions, and from what I got the report here by Arild, that the Pan-Arctic DBO collaboration was pointed out as a good example of coordination and the will to coordinate and for getting more out of already for existing resources or already put efforts, but squeeze out more and have more shoulders to rely on. And also support was voiced for building this Arctic Ocean Regional Observing Alliance, which Craig talked about, and where then the DBO network is seen as one of the crucial building blocks. So that was also a side event where not only scientists participated, but on the contrary, some of the higher ups in each country. So I think that was also a fortunate event. And the very last thing then, where of course the leads of all DBOs and some more partners have very recently been involved in pre-proposals submitted to Nordic US-Canada call, as you see here, the Sustainable Development of the Arctic. On our side, it's called a Nordforsk funding agency. And this is exactly to solidify this even more, the Pan-Arctic DBO, and try to actually get funds for activities, both as I understand it, both the research type of activities or maybe some instrumentation and also the coordination entities. And it's a little bit busy slide, but as with everything we do, we try to extend the observations and consolidate collaboration as an emerging Pan-Arctic network of marine observatories involving, now that is the important part, involving the coastal communities. Some of those are already confirmed. I think some more are underway. The ones in black here, you can see where they are located, mainly then in the Baffin Bay and Davis Strait DBO area. And in this way, with bringing them in to empower the local communities and engage them, and us both in a two-way exchange of knowledge. And we hope to bring forward things forward with that. But this is a pre-proposal, so we are waiting for the final verdict if we are invited to write the full proposal towards the end of fall. And yeah, next steps and events. sorry, I don't see the time here. It's running, I guess. You please, yeah, as you know, perhaps already, please connect to our web pages, the DBO here to the left and the ADBO to the right. We try to have a list of events there and some news from the networks. You see a list of the upcoming meetings. In very soon, we meet with a smaller group to follow up on the meeting in Edinburgh, as I talked about, and just to put up some realizable milestones and to do items for us to solve until we meet with the communities later in fall. And you have the PAG meeting that Jackie mentioned, and our ADBO meeting is in Bremen this year in Germany in early December. You're very welcome to attend also from the Pacific side if you wish. So keep an eye on the ADBO website for that. And then, yeah, the next summit week. But before I leave you, also some advertisement about an ADBO session in the European Polar Science Week, which is a rather new thing organized by the European Commission and the European Satellite Agency. So it's focused on our side here in Europe, but we are having a short ADBO session there, also very limited time, but try to broadcast that better. And the specific date is to be decided within this time frame. Yeah, all right. So now that was all for my part, and please get involved if not already.
All right. Thank you so much, Anna. There's a lot of information there. I'm glad it's great to see new versions of the map too, and I appreciate taking the time there while it's the evening in Finland on that. Does anybody have any questions for Anna? I think we had a lot of information, but does anybody have anything in particular?
I wanted to just squeeze it out there in case some more people also read it along the line, and
Yes.
At least there are some notes about the events and trying to hook on to that.
No, I think it's great, and it has the listing, and it was good because I hadn't heard much from the Barcelona meeting, but I think it gives the community, the people that are online, and this will be posted too, all the activities that are going on to make the programs go from
exactly
different scales, right? From regional to the Pan-Arctic part.
And sometimes it goes very quickly and things happen all at the same time, and sometimes it's perhaps a bit slower, but it seems to be a good moment of this Pan-Arctic, the full Pan-Arctic view and context. So we're trying to catch that.
I think so. So I appreciate you taking the time in your evening to do this. Unless anybody
You're very welcome.
Yeah, anybody have any question? And then all these presentations and the recording will be available on the IARPC website. So I think unless anybody has any questions, and I'm going to close it out. We have just a few minutes. Does anybody have any updates they want to bring forward related to topics for future webinars or meetings that they might want to go to or know about? I would just say there's an Arctic Circle meeting in Reykjavik, where the Synoptic Arctic Survey will be brought forward, and that's I think in October. Maybe it's the second week of October. We have the American Geophysical Union. We have a session submitted there for just open Arctic ecosystems. So you'll hear about that if it gets accepted. Does anybody else have any updates on? I know people are planning to go in the field this summer, so they may already be there. I just know that we have ice, a lot of ice around Bering Strait and northward right now still. So that's about what I know. Anybody have anything they want to add before we
yeah,
go ahead, Anna.
Something I could add from the IARPC side. Everyone definitely stay tuned for dates and details on our next marine ecosystems meeting, but our observations community of practice does have a meeting. It's the week after next, Monday, June 24th, and it's going to be on developing action plans for the Arctic Observing Summit outcomes. So that session will have a quick review of AOS outcomes, and then mostly breakout sessions to brainstorm around actions to advance recommendations stemming from the summit. So I'll just put a link to that event in the chat.
Okay, that's great. And I should just mention, I just came across, there will be 3 webinars from the International Synoptic Arctic Survey. So if you put SAS Bergen in your Google Drive, you'll come up, and I think it's next week that some of those presentations occur. And then it's also includes some of the past ones. So just I know that that's all virtual. So unless there's anybody else to make any comments, we're at the top of the hour. And just to highlight something, just to let you know, in September we'll have one on the Arctic color. So that's the NASA one. So I'm working to have something related to presenting that coastal observing pretending plans for activities. And then in the fall, I'm also going to connect the terrestrial, the Earth scientists that are do oceanography, cryosphere, so forth, with planetary scientists that want to sample Enceladus and other places like that as a crossover fertilizations between different type of sites. So you'll hear more about that. That'll be in the fall. So that's all I have to say. Okay. Thank you all for joining.
Thank you, everybody. And thank you,
Okay.
Jackie.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye.